Welcome back to QAV America. Tony, this is episode 39. We're recording this the 10th of February, 2026. How you doing, TK?
Good. Better after the weekend when the market's back up.
Crazy time, both in
Yeah.
Australia and in the US in the market. The US sort of had a bit of a conniption late last week, which, as we always say over here, when the US market sneezes, we all get a cold. Our market dropped, and then the US market recovered over the weekend, and so our market recovered yesterday. Who knows what's going to happen this week? But we just play it day by day. The US portfolio, though, our dummy portfolio, is going great guns again. As you know, it's been running since September 2023. It's up 103% since then versus the S&P 500, which is up 56, 57%. So we're not quite doing double market, but not far off it. But the crazy thing is that 2 months ago, on the 4th of December, we were neck and neck with the S&P 500. We had been up, and then we came back down, and then now we've, just in the last 2 months, we've gone back to almost double. So it's been a crazy couple of months. Some of the highlights, Willis Lease Finance Company is up 328% since we bought it. Innova is up 166. Foreign Trade Bank of Latin America, BLX, is up 100. ESEA, Euroseas, is up 91. Gas, GASS, Stealth Gas, is up 58. Just so people know, we obviously aren't investing. We're value investors. A couple of Australian value investors on this show talking about the American market. We don't look at Mag 7 stocks. The tech stocks generally don't end up on our buy list because we're looking for things that are ideally generating cash but undervalued, although the stock I'm going to talk about today certainly doesn't meet the first criteria. It's more of a cigar butt stock, but it's on our buy list, so I'm going to talk about it. But just basic businesses, like over the last couple of years on our buy list, a lot of financial services companies, a lot of energy companies, a lot of shipping companies have been on our buy list. And so we just buy what our buy list tells us to buy, and so far it's been doing quite well over the last couple of years in the American market. We've also, I've been tracking the companies that I've done deep dives on this show, pulled porks, as we call them. So these aren't actually in our portfolio. We haven't added them because our portfolio is full. We have a limited amount of capital that we put into the portfolio. But some of these have done very well. Zep, the mobile phone company that we talked about in July of last year, was up 800%. When I looked the other day, it was down to only being up 300%. And now it's back up to 652%. So in a day or two, that has doubled in share price again. It was $2.98 when we talked about it. It's currently trading at $22.43. Bonkers. But, you know, there's a range of performances from the stocks that we've talked about. Generally speaking, we've talked about 36 stocks since March of last year. 28 of them are up, 7 of them are down, win ratio of about 78%. And the ones that are up quite well. Some of the surprising ones, Top Golf, which was, what was it?
Callaway.
Yeah, no, but what was the original? I think it was Top G was the ticker code. It changed its ticker code to CALY a little while ago. It's up 41% since we talked about it. Korea Electric Power is up 30% since we talked about it in November. Vale SA, we talked about in December. It's up 30% since we talked about it. VLRS, we talked about last month. Controladora Vuela Compañía de Aviación. It's up 11% since we talked about it. Cord Energy, that we talked about the end of January, is up 7% since we talked about it. Axle, I wanted to mention these guys. We talked about Axle. When did we do them? October last year. Their ticker code was AXL, American Axle and Manufacturing Holdings. They changed their name to the Dow Corporation, changed their ticker code to DCH. They're up 46% since we talked about them in October. Not to be confused with Bausch, BHC, that we talked about in July. They're down 5%. Seneca, that we talked about in July, is up 17%. I think you've got some news about Seneca in your notes for today.
Yeah, I just saw that their quarter three results came out and their margins had improved and their sales had improved. So I haven't tracked every alert from every company on the buy list that we've spoken about. This is one of the early ones. And it's the frozen food company. But yeah, having a good time at the moment. Sales up, margin up.
Another company that just reported in the US is Regional Management, consumer finance company, ticker code RM. They came out with their Q4 report. Q4 net income up 30%, beat analysts' expectations, driven by record originations. EPS up 33%. Company achieved all-time best operating expense ratio of 12.4%. And the shares fell by 15%. When the report came out. Don't you love it when that happens? Beat expectations, great numbers, share price fall. But they are up 50% since we bought them in March of 2024, so we're not complaining. Well, that's basically my portfolio update. Although, hold on, I can do the portfolio for the last 1 month. The actual portfolio is up 15% for the month, 14.69, versus the S&P negative 0.02. So it's just been a, bonkers few months for us. The last 90 days, our portfolio is up 32.5% versus the S&P 500 up 3.5%. So we're doing 10 times in the last 90 days. As we always say, won't last. Things will balance out over time. But at the moment, for whatever reason, our US portfolio is doing very well. So today I'm going to talk about a company called Mammoth Energy Services, Tony. Ticker code TUSK, TUSK. Because mammoths have tusks, I assume. Their name was chosen to represent their goal of becoming a giant, vertically integrated force in the energy services sector.
And Mammoth Energy Services, if you took those in acronyms, would be a mess. So
well, that might be...
good choosing Tusk.
That might have been a more appropriate ticker code, as it turns out, because they are a complete mess. In my notes, I wrote, mammoths have tusks. You know what also has tusks? Wild pigs.
Walruses?
Yeah, walruses. Okay. And so the question that you have to answer, because I haven't added these to our light portfolio yet this week because I wanted to talk to you about it. We'll want to see if this is a mammoth in the making or just a wild pig. And as I said to you in our last show when we were talking about this, when we do pulled porks deep dives on Australian companies, which you are generous enough to do each week, you pick a company that's on our buy list and you go into it, do a bit of a deep dive to find out who they are, what they do, what they're about. They're usually pretty boring. They're mining stuff out of the ground. Today you did a pearl company. Banks, retailers, fleet management. What else have we done recently?
Miners.
Almond farmers we did a little while back. Boring with boring management and boring stories, but they're making money and they're cheap for some reason, and so they're on our buy list. I reckon about 50% of the companies that I talk about on this US show have got dirty stories somewhere in their not too recent history. And I'm wondering, why is it that we see so many dirty stories coming up on our US buy list? And we don't see that in Australia on our buy list. Not to say that they don't exist in Australia, not to say that there aren't well-run, morally, ethically, high-standard companies in the US. But I'm picking these companies at random because they're at the top of our buy list in the US, and 50% of the time, maybe higher, maybe 75% of the time, there's a dirty, dark secret, which is obviously part of the reason why they're cheap.
Yeah, exactly.
But we don't see that in the Australian market for some reason. They're not ones at the top of our buy list anyway. So I haven't quite worked out why that is, but they make for interesting stories. So this will be another one this week. Let me get into it. Who are they? Well, their website says Mammoth is an integrated, growth-oriented company providing a diversified suite of rental, infrastructure, and energy services across North America. Mammoth's offerings, by the way, Mammoth was the original name of Van Halen when they started, before David Lee Roth convinced them to change their name to Van Halen. And Eddie Van Halen's son, Wolfgang Van Halen, after he created his own band, has called his band Mammoth. So we're not talking about Wolfgang Van Halen's band, talking about this company. Mammoth's offerings span specialized equipment rentals, supporting, although they could hire him to do like a theme song. He should do an ad. He should have done a Super Bowl ad for Mammoth. I'm not sure they can afford, well, they probably can't afford a Super Bowl ad. But anyway, back to the equipment rentals supporting aviation, construction, and energy operations, as well as utility infrastructure solutions, including engineering, design, and fiber optic services. The company also provides natural sand proppant for hydraulic fracturing, often called frac sand, directional drilling services, and workforce accommodation facilities designed to support large-scale projects in remote locations. By combining technical expertise with a broad service platform, Mammoth helps customers achieve greater efficiency, flexibility, and value across their operations.
And we see a lot of these companies in Australia. It's mining services businesses are usually good businesses in Australia. The classic thematic is you buy picks and shovels in a gold rush. So you own the company supplying the company that digs for the gold rather than the gold itself.
Yeah. Now, speaking of frac sand, that reminds me of Frick Frack, a book that I've started reading about the Great Riviera Bank Robbery by Albert Spieggiari. You ever heard of this?
I have not.
Man. I got into this because, I'm reading Day of the Jackal, Frederick Forsyth's novel. And so I started getting into having conversations with Gemini and going through Wikipedia about what was going on in France in the early 60s. So as you will recall, no doubt, because you have a memory like a steel trap, the book is set in the early 60s. They're trying to assassinate de Gaulle. And in order to finance the hiring of the Jackal to do that, this right-wing terrorist organization, the OAS, needs to do a lot of bank robberies around France to get the funds to pay the assassin to kill de Gaulle. Now, apparently there were a lot of bank robberies. There was a spate of armed car and bank robberies in France in the early 60s. The most famous of which is the Great Riviera Bank Robbery, run by this guy called Albert Spieggiari. And he wrote a book about it later on in life, and it's absolutely an incredible story. I'm gonna side plot here for a minute because I know you're going to love this. And I meant to tell you about it last week, and I forgot. Actually, it was made into a film too, starring Ian McShane, who people will know from Deadwood and or the John Wick films probably these days. So basically, these guys found out that there was a bank somewhere in Nice, in France, the Société Générale Bank. 1976, it was well after the late 60s, the early 60s. They found out that there was a sewer tunnel that ran underneath the vault of this bank. So they spent 2 months in this sewer tunnel, basically drilling from the sewer tunnel up to the bank vault. They had beds, tables, wine, cheese, took their time. They'd wait till nighttime when there was nobody in the bank, and then they'd do their work. They spent 2 months just luxuriously drilling. He was associated with the OAS, apparently, to do this. That's why the story ties in. They had 20 people involved, 30 tanks of acetylene. They dug an 8-meter long tunnel, which is 26 feet for Americans listening, from the sewer to the vault floor, used rubber rafts and hundreds of meters of electrical cables for lighting, set up picnic tables, air mattresses, the whole thing. They went in over a long weekend. I think it was Bastille Day in 1976. They knew the bank was going to be shut for a few days. Went in, leisurely stole 46 million francs worth of money, securities, and valuables. It was the largest heist in the history of bank robberies at that time. And they left a note on the wall of the vault in French, sans armes, ni haine, ni violence, without weapons, neither hatred nor violence, is what they wrote on the walls. Have a nice day. We just robbed you.
Yeah.
A couple of guys got caught. So this is the best bit of the story. Ratted out Spiaggiari. It was a former girlfriend of one of the thieves got arrested, and he got arrested, and he implicated the entire gang. Spiaggiari had been accompanying the mayor of Nice in the Far East as his official photographer, got arrested at the airport, denied his involvement, and then claimed he was working to fund a secret political organization in Italy. Anyway, during his hearing, he made a coded fictitious document which he claimed was evidence. He was in court on the 10th of March 1977. I'm going to read from Wikipedia. While Judge Richard Bouaziz was distracted by the document, Spiaggiari jumped out of a window, landing safely on a parked car, and escaped on a waiting motorcycle. Some reports said that the owner of the car later received a 5,000 franc check in the mail for the damage to his roof. And then he remained free for the rest of his life and wrote his memoirs. He's reported to have had plastic surgery and spent most of his life in Argentina visiting France clandestinely to see his mother or his wife. Died of lung cancer, age 56, in 1989. There you go. What an amazing story. What's that got to do with this? Nothing, except his memoirs is called Frick Frack, and that reminded me when I read Frack Sand. So back to this company. So they were engineered as a roll-up by a company called Wexford Capital LP. These are the architects. These guys have been around since the early 90s. They're a multi-billion-dollar private equity and hedge fund firm known for distressed plays and roll-ups. In 2014, they basically smashed together a bunch of energy service companies that they had bought, turned them into Mammoth. They installed a guy called Artie Schreella as CEO. And as of today, Wexford still owns 45.8% of the stock.
Right.
3 of the board members are Wexford executives. So when you're buying TUSK, you're really buying this company's operation, and you're betting on their ability to make it work and exit it profitably at some point. It's pretty small by American standards. Market cap's 112 million. Enterprise value is 1.52 million. And their revenue is about 146 million. And they've got a ton of cash, but we'll get to that. Okay, so what do? Well, it's changed a lot in the last couple of years. Until recent years, they had 3 main divisions, all involved in energy, and a bunch of secondary divisions. But the primary ones were well completion services. So they provide a range of services and equipment to independents, fracking companies. As we've talked about, we did EC recently, Eco Petrol. We did Cord Energy a couple of episodes ago. Fracking is one of those things that is famously, you run up a mine. If the oil price goes up, you shut it down when the oil price goes down. But we talked with Cord Energy. We talked about how they're doing horizontal drilling, and that's changed the dynamics and the cost base for it. These guys do all of that. If you want to run up your mine, they come in. You hire them, they come in, they can get the mine up and running, they can provide the equipment and all that kind of stuff. They specialize in what are called low permeability formations. I drilled down into this a little bit, and the analogy that I got was a brick versus a sponge.
Hard rock. Yeah.
Hard rock, yeah. So if you have a...
Because they're called Mammoth, right? They're only going to do hard rock.
Hard rock, yeah. Heavy metal. That's what they do. Heavy metal oil. Yeah, so basically a lot of these places that you end up fracking, there's a lot of hard rock you need to get through. You need to blow it open, keep it open, find it, get in. It's difficult. Low permeability formations.
Yeah.
So that's a big part of their business. The other part of their business is natural sand proppant services. Basically, they mine and refine and supply the sand to blow. So when you're doing this fracking stuff, you have water, but you have sand mixed in with the water that smashes through the rock and keeps it open and all that kind of stuff. So they produce all of that. They've got a whole bunch of other businesses, subsidiaries, directional drilling, aka the core energy stuff where they can go horizontal, aviation services, which is a growing part of their business, oil field equipment rentals, remote accommodation for mining operations, equipment manufacturing and repair. They can build their own machinery and all that kind of stuff. A lot of it's in-house. Crude oil hauling, all that kind of stuff. They've got a fleet of trucks, et cetera, et cetera. They also had a business they still have an infrastructure services business, but they had a bigger part of it. It was called T&D, which stood for
technical development.
T&D. What did T&D stand for? T&D. Transmission and distribution. Electricity grid.
Of power.
Yeah, energy grid stuff. But they sold that off late last year. More on that. It was high voltage transmission lines and substations and electricity infrastructure repair and maintenance. They sold that off, and I'll talk about that later. But the big dirty story is the Cobra division. So part of the Mammoth was the Cobra. Barry and Stan heavily involved in branding for this company, I think. So they have a division called Cobra Acquisitions, LLC. In 2017, Hurricane Maria hit Puerto Rico, caused a lot of damage, and Cobra Acquisitions got a $200 million contract to help rebuild the electricity grid. Within a very short period of time, that $200 million contract became a $1.85 billion contract.
Wow.
Yeah. So the contract technically was with PREPA, P-R-E-P-A, the Puerto Rico Electric Power Authority, but it was organized by FEMA, the Federal Emergency Management Agency. And for non-American listeners, you've probably heard of FEMA, but they're the lead US agency responsible for coordinating the federal government's role in preparing for, preventing, mitigating, responding to, and recovering from domestic disasters. Not sure if Donald Trump has shut them down or Elon fired everyone. I think there was something in the news last year about them being demobilized or budget
defunded,
cuts or something. Yeah. But anyway, at the time, so the way it worked was FEMA engaged Cobra to do this work in Puerto Rico for PREPA. FEMA, Cobra, Petra, and TUSK. The FEMA Deputy Regional Administrator was a lady by the name of Asha Tribble. She was the one basically giving this work to Cobra Acquisitions. Right. And she had a colleague, Joe Vander, a.k.a. Jojo Patterson, who was the FEMA Deputy Chief of Staff. So this was a big deal for a relatively small operation. Cobra Acquisitions hadn't been around very long, relatively small, $1.8 billion deal. And to explain it, let me read from the Department of Justice's indictment. From October 2017 to April 2019, Tribble and Douglas Ellison, who was the CEO of Cobra Acquisitions,
Hang on, let me guess. Did they go into the sewers in Puerto Rico?
just it's a better story, even better story.
Okay.
They developed a personal relationship wherein Ellison provided Tribble with things of value with the intent to influence Tribble's performance of official acts. Ellison provided Tribble with personal helicopter use, hotel accommodations, airfares, personal security services, and the use of a credit card. As part of Ellison's pattern of providing things of value to Tribble, he also secured employment within Cobra's affiliated companies for her friend, co-defendant Jojo Patterson. In exchange, Tribble performed official acts including influencing, advising, and exerting pressure on PREPA and FEMA officials in order to award restoration work to Cobra and accelerate payments to Cobra. These defendants were supposed to come to Puerto Rico to help during the recovery after the devastation suffered from Hurricane Maria. Instead, they decided to take advantage of the precarious conditions of our electric power grid and engaged in a bribery and honest services wire fraud scheme in order to enrich themselves illegally, said U.S. Attorney Rosa Emilia Rodriguez Velez. All government officials are entrusted with performing their duties honestly and ethically, said Donald Trump. No, wait, no, that's not right. The charged offences are reprehensible, more so in light of PREPA's and Puerto Rico's fiscal crisis. Defendants Tribble and Ellison are facing a forfeiture allegation of the following: $1 million contained in Charles Schwab and Company's account in the name of Donald Keith Ellison, seized on April 26, 2019. $3,425,512.93 contained in Charles Schwab and Company account in the name of Ellison, seized on June 18, 2019. One Myco boat trailer, one Caterpillar Model D5K2 LGP tractor, one Caterpillar Model 320EL hydraulic excavator, $71,551.40 in a checking account at JP Morgan Chase in the name of Ellison. $276,583 contained in a savings account at JP Morgan Chase in the name of Ellison. More money in different bank accounts, and one 2018 Invincible 40-foot catamaran, and one 2018 Ford F-150 XL crew cab pickup truck.
So are these allegations, or are that actually been proven? And
they were allegations at the time, and then in December 22, Ellison was sentenced to 6 months and 1 day in prison and a $20,000 fine. 6 months and $20,000. And he was stripped of $4.4 million in assets, including the 40-foot catamaran. Asher Tribble also got 6 months and 1 day in jail.
Not in Puerto Rico.
And a $15,000 fine. Today, she's the lead consultant at Arc Dome Strategies, advising on emergency management, renewable energy, and strategic communications. I looked her up. And Artie Straehla, who was the CEO of TUSK, Mammoth at the time, and signed the contracts on behalf of Cobra, was never indicted or criminally charged, even though he signed everything. He was not caught up in all of this. But he was sued by investors as well as other directors, claiming they caused the company to file false financial information by failing to disclose that the $1.8 billion contract was obtained through bribery. In January of 2022, a settlement was reached where Mammoth's insurance company paid out $1.5 million to the company to resolve these claims against Straehla and other directors. Now, here's the other fun fact. At the time when they signed these contracts to do this work for PREPA was already bankrupt. The Puerto Rican Electricity Authority had gone bankrupt in July of 2017 before the hurricane hit. They were carrying $9 to $10 billion in debt, had failed to set electricity rates high enough to cover their basic costs, and just borrowed money using bonds for years and years and years to pay off existing debts and fuel their operations. So the electrical infrastructure of the state was in a state of extreme deterioration, making it unreliable even before the grid was officially decimated by Hurricane Maria, which meant that when all of this went down, Cobra couldn't get all of the funds that it was owed. However, they were paid 1.5 out of the $1.8 billion before all of the bribery stuff came to light. They managed to get it paid because Asher Tribble was making sure that Prepper gave them priority payment.
Right.
And so when it all blew up, though, FEMA's auditors said, yeah, we're not paying for the rest of this. FEMA was supposedly supposed to get the money from Prepper to pay Cobra. It's very convoluted. Anyway, bottom line is change of management at Cobra, eventually a change of management at Mammoth as well. And they were left with $350 million that they couldn't get from Prepper. They had to take a haircut on some of that. There was a settlement. There was a settlement where they basically it was agreed that they would get paid for some money by the courts, surprisingly enough. But they also were being sued by 15 Puerto Rico municipalities claiming Cobra owed them $75 million in unpaid taxes. So anyway, bottom line is Strahella ended up resigning, the CEO of Mammoth, and was replaced by an insider, Phil Lancaster, took over the CEO role January 1st, 2025. He had been the vice president of corporate development at Mammoth, also served as the interim president of Cobra Acquisitions from January 2019 to November 2019 when the former CEO was being indicted for bribery. But he didn't stick around long. So he takes over, and the company's not in a good situation last year. They've got hundreds of millions of dollars they can't claim. Fracking was not in a good situation. A lot of their clients, they've got a lot of idle businesses. Their sand operation is bleeding. And they're finding it hard, surprisingly, to win new contracts for things, particularly government contracts, because they've just been sued for bribery. So their reputation is in the toilet. They're really struggling. So this guy, Phil Lancaster, gets promoted, and he decides he needs to self-liquidate to get some cash and also to reinvent the company. So they were losing about $4 million a quarter, and he decided to sell off a bunch of their key assets, including their big money maker at the time, which was this T&D energy grid business that I mentioned.
Right.
So late last year, they sold off 3 of their subsidiaries for a total of about $108 million to a company called Peak Utility Services Group, who was owned by Oryx, that we did a deep dive on back in June of 2025, around about the time all of this was going on. And their share price is up 62% since then, Oryx's share price. So well
Good
done if you got into Oryx when we talked about them. But what Peak bought wasn't just the assets, they also bought Phil Lancaster. So he left Mammoth as having been the CEO for less than a year, and went to become a vice president at Peak. So Mammoth sold off its number one asset and its number one guy, talent, to Peak. Guess who took over as CEO when Phil Lancaster left? Tony?
Oh, not the person who was indicted, I hope.
No.
Huh.
The Lancaster's son, Bernie Lancaster.
Okay.
Yeah, his 37-year-old son, Bernard Lancaster, then became the CEO of what is left of Mammoth. And he's trying to pivot Mammoth into new lines of business. So that is sort of the story until today. But here's where they are today. They've got an infrastructure business still, the bit that they didn't sell off. They've still got number of divisions. They sold off a couple of others, an engineering business called Aqua Wolf, another cool name. They had all the cool names, these guys, and a fracking fleet. But he's trying to pivot them into aviation rentals and fiber optics. But here's the thing. They have no debt and a ton of cash. So on the books, if you look at their revenue and their profit, doesn't look good. It's been declining for obvious reasons for years, but they're sitting on a bunch of cash and they're cheap. So basically what you're buying is a cash box here. And it's not so much Bernie Lancaster that I'm interested in, but is it Wexler? What did I say their name is? Wexford.
Wexford, yep.
Kim Wexler was Rhea Seehorn's character in Better Call Saul. Wexford Capital. Wexford Capital are really the people running this thing, right? They own nearly 50% of it. So it's everybody running this thing runs at the pleasure of Wexford Capital, I assume. I guess they managed to survive the whole Puerto Rico situation untouched. But anyway, so they've got this cash-rich stub of a company now. The last numbers that I've got are from late last year. They're due to report in about a month from now, early March. But this is where they are at the moment. This is from their Q3 10Q report, filed October 31st, 2025. Total liquidity, the company had $153.4 million in total liquidity, including $98.2 million in unrestricted cash. No debt. They paid off their credit facility. And they had $19.8 million in restricted cash released back to the company, padding the war chest. So after selling off all of their different assets, they've got what I call the leftover operation. The sand segment is bleeding. I think partly because the fracking side of things has been quiet, but also it looks like their sand is expensive to produce and there are cheaper sands that people are using.
Right.
The sand revenue cratered 45% year over year in Q3 2025. They sold 25% less sand and at a 20% lower average price. They took a big impairment charge as well as they began marketing their piranha and musky sand assets for sale. I don't know what, musky? Isn't musky a dog or something? I don't know what piranha is.
Husky.
Yeah. A husky, yeah. What's a muskie? I don't know.
No idea.
So yeah, it's the sand side of the business is killing them. Selling less sand, what they're selling it is at a loss, and they're still paying for all of the infrastructure that goes along with all of this. So they took a one-time charge trying to stop the bleed on that, but it's not great. So the sand business is a bit of a wild pig by the looks of it, unless things turn around. The aviation side of things is what they're betting big on. Deployed $40 million year to date in 2025 to expand the fleet. It had a 27% revenue increase in Q3. So they're buying a bunch of planes. They apparently figure that that's part of the future of the company is fleet, air fleet rentals. Who did we do? We did an air fleet. AEC, was it? AER. No, that was a different. That was everything. We did a air fleet company.
Yeah.
Anyway,
Can't recall.
They've also got this remote accommodations in Canada, the Sand Tiger Lodge, but it has roughly 24% utilization in Q3 2025. So I don't think that's going too well either. So that's where the business is basically at, sort of bleeding money, losing money, trying to find new lines of business like the fiber optics stuff that they're growing out, which is aerial and buried fiber. Don't know much about what that actually does, but it's where they're sort of investing a lot of money for the future. total consolidated revenue for Q3 was 46.8 million. Oh, by the way, sand is also a commodity, and I found a spot price for
prop end?
for the
Okay.
sand that they use. And it's a Josephine at the moment, but it's about 15% of their revenue. So I'm not really considering them a Josephine as a result of that, but it's something to keep an eye on. The last note that I have on them is, unlike AMTD that I had to sell, these guys upgraded their accountants, which I actually take as a good sign. They upgraded from Grant Thompson to Deloitte in March of 2025. So they upgraded to a Big Four accounting firm, and for Deloitte to take them on suggests that Deloitte thinks that they're probably the skeletons are out of the closet and they're probably have some upside. I actually think that's a bit of a green flag for these guys. But the bottom line is, I think of them as a bit of a cigar butt turnaround, Tony. They've burned their old life to the ground. Executives went to jail.
New passports, stash of cash.
Yeah.
Heading for the border.
Speaking of the Day of the Jackal, they jumped out the window and rode off on a motorbike to live in Argentina. So it's sort of like a clean slate operation. Zero bank debt, 153.4 million in total liquidity, including cash and some stuff that they can sell. Some businesses that are running that could ramp up if the oil price goes up and fracking comes back online. The aviation and the fiber stuff that may turn into cash flow stream or may not remains to be seen. But again, it kind of gets back to Wexford Capital and how well they can take this and rebuild, I guess, with $150 million worth of cash, $160 million worth of cash. Can they take that with, a bunch of different assets, a lot of experience in fracking and the fracking ecosystem, particularly, I think, in Oklahoma, sort of where they're based. Eastern Ohio and Oklahoma, I think, are their core operations. But on the surface of it, not the greatest looking business I've ever seen. But their share, if you look at their share graph, they did just bounce off their sell line at the end of last year and have started ticking up. So somebody thinks it's a buy, not just us. Just to run through some of the numbers quickly. So price to operating cash flow is 0.85, which for us is just kind of a lay down misère, right? You get your cash back in under a year. They didn't score for quality rank or stock rank. Their F score is an 8 out of 9 because it's a big turnaround situation. So they did score for that. Didn't score for their price being less than our IVs. They did score for price being less than book and book plus 30. They did score for a new 3-point upturn and for a 3-point upturn in general, positive sentiment. I gave them an 8 out of 12, 67%. Not terrific, but not terrible either. And they had a QAV score of 0.79.
It's high. Based on this prop cap, though.
Yeah. It's all pretty much based on the prof cap and the price to book, They do have assets and they're insanely cheap, but, they've also sold off a lot of stuff. Whether or not they even have a business moving forwards is anyone's guess, but they're sitting on a ton of cash. Well, not a ton, but $160 million. I mean, they might be able to buy a data center, turn themselves into an AI company. I don't know.
Well, given that Wexford controls the board and they're private equity, they'd love to have a pile of cash to go and buy something to do deals with. So, that's more than likely what will happen is they'll acquire something, I would have thought.
Yeah, and I don't know much more about the Wexford Capital guys, but they have been around since, as I said, like the early 90s. So they must be doing something right, I would assume.
Mm-hmm.
And I know if it was Warren Buffett running this and he had $160 million to play with, he would do something smart with it. He'd buy, and they've got
Coke shares.
yeah, they've got experience in buying distressed assets and doing roll-ups, as I
Right.
said before, and that kind of stuff. So anyway, what do you think?
Yeah, I think you're right. It's a classic cigar, but it reminds me of a lot of these companies remind me of Warren Buffett when he's talking about finding a company that's got really good numbers, but there's some kind of stink around it. And classic example was the olive oil scandal with Diners Club, where there was bad press around Diners Club because someone had ripped them off because they forged the amount of olive oil that they had in tanks that they were lending against, and Diners Club got caught up in it and was on the nose with analysts, but Warren realised that Diners Club cards were still being used and all around town, so he bought Diners Club on the cheap. Not quite the same sort of story because this company has to have a few cards go their way, but you're still being well rewarded for the risk. You're buying the cash they've got on hand at the moment.
I forgot to mention that they also have announced they're going to do a $50 million share buyback. I think it has to be approved at an AGM or a board meeting or something like that, but it looks like it's going to go ahead. So, there's also going to have a major event for shareholders that could be a good thing at some point in the near future.
Yeah, support for the price.
Yeah.
Yeah. But that's interesting. That means there's you said 160 million on the balance sheet, and they're going to use 50 to buy back shares. That's interesting play for private equity guys. You think they go and buy something else, but
yeah,
obviously know more about the company than we do.
Yeah. So, well, I will add it to the QAV Light portfolio this week, and I don't mind, taking a punt on some of these sort of cigar butt turnaround businesses and see what Wexford Capital and their underlings can do with it.
Yeah, and we're getting, even though it's a risk play, we're getting well compensated for that risk. So much cash being thrown off by the business that's left and sitting on their books that, there's some kind of margin of safety there.
Yeah, well, speaking of taking risks, if I look at the other light stocks, I told you last week that I had to sell a couple, but, just a couple that I've had recently. I mentioned before that VLRS is up 13% and Cord Energy is up 7% since we added them to the light portfolio. So the light portfolio is doing pretty well, despite the fact that I had to sell a couple early on. So we'll add this one to it and see what happens. If it, as we always say, if it's a bad call, we'll just sell it when it breaches one of our sell conditions and move on.
Yep. And that's worked for us in Australia and it's working for us in the US now too. So
yeah. Like AMC Networks is down 22% since I bought them. I did sell them along the way, but your idea of them floating off, you said, well, Breaking Bad and Walking Dead.
Yeah,
and
their IP.
I
thought their IP was very valuable.
Yeah. Oh, well, hasn't worked out for them so far. Well, thank you for listening to all of that, TK, and giving me your thoughts on that one.
Yeah, no problems.
Another fun story to go over. And we'll be back next week.
Good. Thanks, Cam.
Thank you.